In the penthouse of New York, a perfect dinner concealed dangerous secrets. Emily, the underestimated wife, finally breaks her silence. Each word revealed not only threatens an empire, but redefines what power and legacy truly mean. Are you prepared to witness the Thompson Empire crumble? The sun set on the horizon of New York, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink that reflected off the mirrored windows of the skyscrapers. In the penthouse of Central Park, the Thompson mansion buzzed with preparations for what would be one of the most memorable dinners in the family's history. Emily Thompson personally oversaw every detail, her delicate fingers adjusting the placement of the silver cutlery and the imported crystal glasses. "Madam, the florists have just arrived with the arrangements," announced Sophia, the Filipino housekeeper who had worked for the family for over a decade. Emily nodded softly, her serene face masking the inner storm consuming her. "Please ensure the white orchids are placed at the center of the main table. William always insists on showcasing the most expensive flowers to our guests." As she walked through the grand hall, her Louboutin heels echoing against the Italian marble floor, Emily couldn't help but reflect on how her life had transformed over the past 15 years. From an idealistic young woman from a traditional French family to the wife of tycoon William Thompson, her journey seemed like a modern-day fairy tale. At least that's how everyone saw it. The intercom buzzed, announcing the arrival of the first guests. Emily adjusted her designer silk hijab, making sure every fold was perfectly aligned. It was an exclusive piece, just like the rest of her wardrobe, chosen specifically for that evening. Her long dress in a deep sapphire blue had been hand-sewn in Paris. "Habibi, our guests have started to arrive," she called to William through the internal intercom. The response came in the form of heavy footsteps descending the marble staircase. William Thompson emerged as a commanding figure, his custom-tailored Italian suit accentuating his dominant presence. At 55, he maintained a meticulously groomed appearance, with a perfectly trimmed beard and strategically graying hair at his temples. "I hope everything is perfect, Emily," he remarked, his tone bordering on the veiled threat she knew all too well. "Sheikh Mohammed has confirmed his attendance, and you know how important this partnership is for us." Emily merely smiled, that enigmatic smile that had become her trademark over the years. "Don't worry, Habibi. Everything is exactly as it should be." The guests began to arrive in a procession of jewels and expensive perfumes. The women of the Thompson family were known for their elegance, and that evening was no different. Olivia, William's older sister, entered accompanied by her husband, a businessman in the oil industry. Close behind came the cousins from Los Angeles, followed by the closest partners and their wives. The main hall quickly filled with the sound of conversations in Arabic and English, mixed with polite laughter and the clinking of glasses. Emily moved between the groups with the grace of an experienced hostess, ensuring everyone was comfortable and well served. "Mashallah, Emily," exclaimed Isabella, one of William's cousins. "You've exceeded all expectations. This dinner is simply magnificent." Before Emily could thank her, William's voice thundered through the hall. "Of course it's magnificent. After all, she uses my money to organize these parties. It's the least one would expect, isn't it, Habibi?" The laughter that followed was polite, but Emily noticed the uncomfortable glances exchanged among some guests. It wasn't the first time William had made disparaging remarks about her in public, but that night, something was different. There was a dangerous glint in her eyes, a silent determination that few noticed. Dinner was served promptly at 9 o'clock. The main table, a masterpiece of mahogany with mother-of-pearl inlays, seated 20 people. William naturally occupied the head of the table, with Emily to his right and Sheikh Mohammed to his left. The dishes followed one another in a perfectly choreographed sequence by the waiters. Starting with a red lentil soup with saffron, followed by confit lamb with almond and pistachio rice, every element of the menu had been carefully chosen to impress. It was during the third course that William began his personal show. With confidence fueled by a few glasses of an extremely rare non-alcoholic wine, he launched into a series of stories about his business successes. "You need to understand," he gestured expansively, "that building an empire like mine requires vision. Not everyone has that ability. Some are born to lead, others..." His gaze landed pointedly on Emily. "Are just here to enjoy the benefits." The silence that followed was heavy. Emily kept her eyes fixed on her plate, but her fingers lightly tightened the linen napkin on her lap. Sophia, who was pouring water into one of the glasses, nearly let the bottle slip when she noticed the tension in the air. "Remember when I bought that land in San Francisco?" William continued, seemingly oblivious to the discomfort he was causing. "Everyone said it was madness, that the location was too far from the center, but I saw the potential. Today, that investment is worth 10 times more. That's how you make a fortune, my friends, with vision and courage. And a little help from fate, isn't that right, Habibi?" Emily's voice was soft but loaded with meaning. "After all, that land was only cleared for construction after a mysterious investor intervened with the authorities." William shot a sharp look at his wife, but she continued, her voice maintaining the same serene tone. "It's fascinating how some deals seem to work out almost magically, don't you think?" Sheikh Mohammed leaned slightly forward, his interest visibly piqued. "What's this story about a mysterious investor, William? I don't recall you mentioning that before." "It's nothing important." William dismissed the matter with a brusque gesture. "Just normal business bureaucracy. Emily sometimes mixes up the details. You know how women can be with business matters." The laughter that followed was more restrained this time. There was something in the air, a different energy beginning to manifest. Emily took a small sip of water, her eyes briefly meeting Sophia's as she served dessert. The housekeeper recognized that look. It was the same one she had seen earlier that morning, when Emily spent hours in her private office, organizing documents and making calls. The night was still young, and no one at that table except Emily had any idea of what was to come. As the waiters began clearing the dessert plates, she allowed herself a small smile. In her closet, inside a carefully selected folder, lay documents that would forever shift the balance of power in that household. The question was no longer if she would use them, but when. Sophia, passing by the table again to serve Arabic coffee, noticed that her employer's hands were perfectly steady as she held her porcelain cup. Years of living together had taught the housekeeper that Emily's true strength had always been her ability to remain calm in the face of a storm. And that night, a storm was definitely brewing. The aroma of Arabic coffee filled the room as the guests settled into the living area adjacent to the dining room. The cream-toned Italian velvet sofas contrasted with the dark wood-paneled walls, creating an atmosphere of understated luxury that Emily had meticulously planned. William remained the center of attention, gesturing animatedly as he described his latest acquisition, a hotel complex in the Bahamas. "We closed the deal in record time," he boasted, adjusting the lapel of his Brioni jacket. "No one believed we could get the permit so quickly, but when you have the right connections—" "Interesting connections, no doubt," Emily interjected, softly, her melodious voice carrying a note of irony that only the most attentive would catch, especially those from the Anderson family. The name had an immediate effect on William. For a fraction of a second, his confident smile faltered, and his eyes met his wife's with a mix of surprise and apprehension. The Anderson family was a subject he preferred to keep buried in the past, along with other convenient secrets. "My dear," he tried to regain control of the narrative, "you must be confusing things again. The Andersons had nothing to do with this project." Emily leaned slightly forward in her armchair, her fingers gently drumming on the small Hermes bag she held in her lap. "No? How strange. I'm sure I saw their name on some recent documents. The same ones that arrived by special delivery last week." Sheikh Mohammed, who until then had only observed the interaction with polite interest, straightened in his seat. "The Andersons? I thought they had withdrawn from the hotel market after that incident in 2019. "And they did," confirmed Emily, her gaze never leaving her husband's face. "Officially, at least. But real business doesn't always happen under the spotlight, does it, Habibi?" Sophia, who was discreetly circulating among the guests with a tray of Arabic sweets, noticed the subtle shift in her employer's posture. For years, she had witnessed Emily absorb every derogatory comment, every veiled humiliation with silent dignity. But today, there was something different in her eyes, a calculated determination that reminded the housekeeper of a feline about to pounce. "Speaking of unofficial business," Emily continued, her voice now drawing the attention of everyone present, "does anyone remember that resort in Miami? The one that surprisingly had its construction approved in record time?" Olivia Khalid's sister furrowed her brow. "Golden Sands. But that project was one of my brother's greatest successes. The swift approval was a result of his excellent reputation in the market." Reputation! Emily savored the word as if it were one of the dates served at the table. A curious thing, reputation, so valuable and yet so fragile. With a fluid motion, she opened her bag and pulled out a golden envelope, the same kind used in official government correspondence. "I found something interesting while organizing some old documents. Apparently, the approval of Golden Sands had less to do with reputation and more with other kinds of arrangements." William's face paled slightly. "Emily, I think you've had enough coffee for today. Why don't we leave business discussions in peace?" "But Habibi," she replied with false sweetness, "you always say I should take more interest in your ventures. And after 15 years of marriage, I've finally decided to follow your advice." Sheikh Mohammed extended his hand, his eyes fixed on the envelope. "May I take a look at those documents, Emily?" Before William could intervene, she handed the envelope to the Sheikh. The sound of the paper being unfolded seemed to echo in the suddenly silent room. Sheikh Mohammed's eyes scanned the lines of the document, his eyebrows gradually rising. "This is extraordinary," he murmured, looking from William to Emily. "You've always kept this documentation." "I have kept many things, Your Excellency," replied Emily, her voice now carrying a note of sadness. "Sometimes a wife needs to protect herself, especially when her husband considers her merely a decorative object." William stood up abruptly, his face a mask of contained fury. "I think it's time we end the evening. Clearly my wife is in no condition to continue receiving guests." But no one moved. Sheikh Mohammed continued examining the documents, while the other guests watched the scene with a mix of fascination and discomfort. Olivia, in particular, had her eyes fixed on Emily, as if seeing her for the first time. "You know, William," Emily continued, her voice now firmer, "for years I watched you build your image as a powerful and infallible man. I saw you ridicule people, belittle their efforts, treat employees as disposable. And all that time I kept my silence, holding on to every document, every piece of evidence, every little detail you conveniently forgot to mention in your grand stories." Sophia, who was now standing near the door, held her tray tightly, her hands trembling slightly. In all her years of service, she had never witnessed her mistress confront her husband in this way. The air in the room was thick with tension, like the moments before a desert storm. "And do you know what's most interesting?" Emily went on, pulling another envelope from her bag. "This is just the beginning. There is much more where this came from. 15 years of carefully guarded secrets, of meticulously organized evidence. Because unlike what you think, Habibi, I was never just a pretty face by your side. I was your shadow, your silent witness, and now, well, now it's time to show everyone who really built much of this empire." The silence that followed was deafening. The guests exchanged glances, uncertain of how to react. Sheikh Mohammed carefully folded the documents and handed them back to Emily, his face a mask of diplomatic neutrality, but his eyes revealed a newfound appreciation for the woman before him. William, still standing, seemed to have aged a decade, in mere minutes. His empire, built on a complex web of half-truths and shadowy deals, was beginning to show its first cracks, and his greatest threat did not come from competitors or authorities, but from the person he had always considered his most predictable possession. "The night is still long," Emily remarked, tucking the envelopes into her bag, "and there is much more to discuss. After all, a reputation built over decades deserves an equally meticulous deconstruction, don't you think?" The air conditioning blew softly through the hall, but it wasn't enough to dispel the heat of tension hanging in the air. William remained standing, his hands subtly gripping the back of the Italian leather armchair, while his eyes nervously scanned the faces of the guests, trying to gauge the impact of Emily's revelations. Perhaps we should continue this discussion in private, he suggested, his voice betraying a note of anxiety that his business associates had never witnessed before. Family matters don't need to be exposed in this manner. Family matters. Emily repeated, an enigmatic smile playing on her lips. No, Habibi, this goes far beyond our family. This involves reputations, fortunes, and the future of hundreds of people who depend on our business. Sheikh Mohammed cleared his throat softly, adjusting his posture on the sofa. I must say, William, I am intrigued. I never imagined there were so many nuances in our past transactions. Sophia, who had been discreetly observing the scene while arranging the coffee cups, noticed a subtle movement from Emily. Her employer had just pressed a button on her cell phone, a seemingly casual gesture, but one the housekeeper knew was significant. In recent days, she had seen Emily make several mysterious calls, always speaking in a low voice in her private office. Excellency, Emily addressed the sheikh, her melodious voice carrying a note of determination. Allow me to share something that might interest the board of your investment bank. She retrieved her tablet from her bag, a latest model encased in Hermes leather. With a few precise taps on the screen, she projected a series of graphs onto the opposite wall of the hall, through the home automation system she had personally ordered installed months ago. These are the real numbers of the Harbour View project, she explained, manipulating the graphs with elegance. As you can see, there is a significant discrepancy between the values presented to investors and the reality of the operational costs. Olivia leaned forward, her gold bracelets jingling softly. But that's impossible. I personally supervised part of those reports. Ah, dear sister-in-law, Emily replied, her tone almost maternal. You supervised the reports that William allowed you to see. But there were others, stored on a private server, accessible only through a password he believed no one else knew. William stepped forward, his face a mask of contained fury. How you hacked into my private files, that's illegal. Hacked, Emily laughed softly. Don't be dramatic, Habibi. You yourself gave me access years ago on a night when you were particularly pleased with a successful deal. Apparently you don't. Remember many things you do or say in those moments of celebration. Sheikh Mohammed raised an eyebrow, his eyes fixed on the numbers projected on the wall. These values, if they are correct, this completely changes our assessment of the latest project in New York South. And that's not all, continued Emily, sliding her finger across the tablet screen. Look at these bank transfers, all perfectly legal of course, but strategically routed through a network of subsidiary companies that, interestingly, all have something in common. And what would that be? Asked one of the partners present, his voice betraying a mix of apprehension and curiosity. They were all registered under the names of different members of the Anderson family, replied Emily, her voice now more serious. The same family that supposedly had no connection to our current business dealings. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioner and the distant clinking of cutlery being arranged by the staff in the kitchen. Sophia, still near the door, noticed how some of the guests began shifting uncomfortably in their seats. But the most interesting part, Emily continued, now slowly pacing the room, is that all these transactions share a peculiar trait. Each one was preceded by a transfer of equal value from an account in my name. William visibly paled. What account? You don't have any accounts of your own. Oh, but I do, Emily smiled, pulling another envelope from her bag. Remember that. Wedding gift from my father. The apartment in Paris that you insisted I sell because it didn't make sense to hold on to scattered properties. Well, I sold it, but the money didn't go where you thought. She handed the envelope to Sheikh Mohammed, who opened it with evident interest. These are bank statements from an account in Switzerland, he remarked, scanning the documents carefully. Dated from the day after the apartment was sold, Emily finished. And if you look at the dates of the transfers, you'll see that each one perfectly coincides with the critical moments of William's major projects. Moments when, mysteriously, all bureaucratic barriers vanished as if by magic. Olivia stood up abruptly, her face a mask of disbelief. So it was you? All this time while William boasted about his connections and influence. I was the connection, Emily confirmed, her voice carrying a mix of pride and sadness. The decorative wife, who supposedly only knew how to organize dinners and pick curtains, was quietly saving the empire he nearly destroyed multiple times with his arrogance. Sheikh Mohammed carefully folded the documents, his face revealing a new understanding of the situation. "This explains a lot," he murmured, more to himself than to the others. "I always wondered how some of these deals came together so conveniently." Sophia, who had momentarily stepped away to the kitchen, returned with a tray of mineral water. She noticed that some of the guests' hands trembled slightly as they picked up their glasses, while their eyes alternated between Emily and William, like spectators at an intensely competitive tennis match. "But why?" asked one of the wives present, her voice almost a whisper. "Why do all of this in secret? Why let him take all the credit?" Emily paused for a moment, her eyes meeting William's. "Because sometimes true power lies in knowing the right moment to reveal the truth, and that moment, my dear guests, is now." The wall clock showed 10:30 at night, but no one in the room showed any intention of leaving. Sheikh Mohammed had discreetly loosened his traditional scarf, a rare gesture that showed how much the situation affected him. His sharp eyes alternated between the documents in his hands and William's increasingly pale face. "Then, Mrs. Thompson," the Sheikh broke the silence, his voice carrying a new tone of respect, "I presume there are more revelations to share with us." Emily nodded softly, her fingers gliding over her tablet screen once again. "Indeed, Your Excellency, there is a particular matter I believe will be of specific interest to you. It concerns the Silver Gates project." The mention of that name caused an immediate reaction in William. He nearly stumbled as he tried to approach Emily, his usual composure completely forgotten. "No, that matter is off the table." "Nothing is off the table tonight, Habibi," replied Emily, her voice firm but controlled, "especially considering that the Silver Gates nearly cost us our entire fortune and the reputation of the Sheikh's bank." Sophia, who was discreetly arranging some cushions near the window, froze momentarily. She remembered that time well, about 3 years ago, when William would spend entire nights in his office, shouting over the phone in heated conversations. Back then, Emily seemed as serene as ever, but now the housekeeper was beginning to understand that serenity masked intense activity behind the scenes. "The Silver Gates," continued Emily, projecting new documents onto the wall, was presented as a revolutionary project, a complex of offices and residences that would transform the harbor area. Investors practically begged to participate, especially after Sheikh Mohammed's bank announced its support for the venture. "It was a solid project," interrupted William, his voice betraying a slight tremor. "We just faced some unexpected setbacks." "Setbacks?" Emily arched a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Is that what you call ignoring 3 consecutive reports about soil instability in the area? Or the decision to conceal that the site had undisclosed environmental restrictions?" Sheikh Mohammed leaned forward, his expression suddenly more serious. "What reports are these? I was never made aware of any environmental restrictions." "Naturally, you weren't," replied Emily, handing him a new folder, "because those reports were conveniently lost before they reached your desk. But fortunately, I kept copies of everything." Olivia, who had remained silent for some time, stepped forward to examine the documents. Her eyes widened as she recognized certain signatures. "But this has Daniel's signature. My own husband signed these warnings." "Yes, dear sister-in-law," confirmed Emily. "And when he tried to push the matter, he was mysteriously transferred to the Los Angeles branch." A lateral move that, curiously, coincided with the final approval of the project. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel, Olivia's husband, was known for his professional integrity. His sudden transfer had been the subject of much speculation at the time, but no one had dared to question William's decision. "But the real masterstroke," continued Emily, her voice now tinged with irony, "was how the project was saved when everything started to fall apart. Remember that anonymous investor who appeared at the last moment, William? The one who injected enough capital to resolve the structural issues and meet the environmental demands." William paled even further, if that was possible. How do I know?" Emily finished, an enigmatic smile playing on her lips, Because I was the one who organized the entire rescue. That money came from my secret accounts, carefully managed over the years. Every penny you gave me for frivolities, as you used to say, was strategically invested. Sophia watched as the other guests reacted to this revelation. Some whispered among themselves, while others kept their eyes fixed on Emily, as if seeing her for the first time. The housekeeper couldn't help but notice how her mistress seemed taller, more imposing, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "But why?" asked one of the wives present, her voice betraying admiration and confusion. "Why go through the trouble of saving the business of someone who treated you with such disdain?" Emily paused, her eyes meeting William's for a brief moment. "Because unlike my husband, I understand that an empire isn't built solely on profits and power. It's built on people, relationships, and trust. Every employee who kept their job, every family that could continue paying their mortgage, every dream that wasn't destroyed. That is worth more than all the gold in New York." Sheikh Mohammed placed the documents on the coffee table, his face revealing a new understanding of the situation. "Mrs. Thompson, I must say, I am impressed, not only with your business acumen, but with your long-term vision. A vision your husband clearly failed to appreciate," Olivia added, casting a disapproving glance at her brother. William, who had poured himself water with trembling hands, tried to regain some control of the situation. "This is ridiculous. You can't seriously believe she did all this on her own. She's just what, Habibi?" interrupted Emily, her voice sharp as a Damascus blade. "Just your wife, just a woman? Or just the person who kept your house of cards from collapsing countless times?" The tension in the room reached its peak with Emily's last provocation. The guests, who had initially planned for a night of superficial socializing, now found themselves in the middle of an intricate web of revelations that threatened to completely reshape the business landscape of New York. "Your Excellency," Emily addressed Sheikh Mohammed, maintaining her impeccable composure, "allow me to share something that might better explain the true nature of my husband's business." She slid another document across the coffee table toward the Sheikh. The document in question was a series of contracts, all meticulously organized in chronological order. At first glance, they appeared to be standard business agreements, but as the Sheikh began to examine them more closely, his expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "This is extremely delicate," he commented, adjusting his reading glasses. "These contracts show a systematic pattern of questionable behavior." Sophia, who had returned with a new tray of refreshments, noticed how the Sheikh's hands trembled slightly as he handled the papers. In her years of service at the Thompson residence, she had never seen the powerful businessman display such a level of unease. "Questionable is a polite euphemism," replied Emily, her voice carrying a note of refined irony. "What these documents actually show is how every major project was built on a foundation of manipulations and mutual favors. Every signature represents a broken promise. Every paragraph hides an inconvenient truth." William, who had poured himself his third glass of water in the past few minutes, tried to intervene. "This is a malicious interpretation of perfectly normal business procedures." "Normal?" Olivia couldn't contain her indignation. "Brother, these documents show that you knowingly ignored safety warnings on 3 different projects. He put lives at risk out of pure greed." "And not just that," continued Emily, projecting a new series of charts onto the wall. "Notice how every seemingly irresponsible decision was followed by a mysterious solution that saved the day. A solution that invariably came with a substantial transfer of funds." Sheikh Mohammed analyzed the numbers with growing attention. "These transfers, they all seem to come from the same source. An account in the Cayman Islands?" "Precisely," confirmed Emily. "An account that curiously was opened on the same day I sold my last properties in France. The same account that over the years served as a safety net for every reckless project my husband undertook." One of the partners present, a grey-haired gentleman who had remained silent until then, leaned forward in his chair. "Mrs. Thompson, are you telling me that you knowingly allowed your husband to take enormous risks, knowing you could bail him out if necessary?" "Not exactly," replied Emily, an enigmatic smile playing on her lips. "I allowed him to build his reputation as an infallible businessman, while quietly ensuring that his impulsive decisions didn't destroy everything we had built. Every risky project, every reckless deal was carefully monitored and, when necessary, discreetly corrected. Sophia, arranging some cushions near the window, recalled the countless nights she had found her employer in the office, hunched over stacks of documents, making calls at odd hours to different time zones. At the time, she had assumed Emily was simply handling household matters or her charitable foundation. Now, it all made sense. But the most fascinating thing, Emily continued, her voice now carrying a note of sadness, is how you, William, never questioned the source of these miraculous rescues. You were so convinced of your own genius that you didn't even consider the possibility that someone close to you was orchestrating everything behind the scenes. The silence that followed was deafening. William, whose face alternated between shades of red and white, seemed to have aged a decade in a matter of hours. His empire, built on a carefully cultivated image of inevitable success, was being methodically deconstructed by the person he had always considered his greatest decorative achievement. "The Andersons," murmured Sheikh Mohammed, still reviewing the documents. "Now I understand why they always seemed so complacent in certain situations. They knew you were the real force behind the decisions." "They always knew," confirmed Emily, "just as they knew that every penny invested in seemingly doomed projects would not only be recovered but multiplied. Because I ensured it would happen, not out of love for money, but out of respect for the people whose lives depended on the success of these ventures." Olivia, who had stepped closer to examine the documents more closely, let out a gasp of surprise. "These signatures, some are from Daniel himself. Did my husband know about all of this?" "Your husband, dear sister-in-law," Emily replied softly, "was one of the few who understood the importance of keeping certain truths protected. His transfer to Los Angeles wasn't a punishment, as William wanted everyone to believe, but a strategy to establish a more discreet base of operations." William's face twisted into a mask of fury and disbelief. "Daniel, my own brother-in-law, conspired against me." "Conspired in your favor, Habibi," Emily corrected, her voice now carrying a note of weariness. "Just like everyone who silently worked to turn your grand visions into sustainable reality. The only real conspiracy was your own ego, which kept you from seeing the truth right before your eyes." The clock had long passed midnight, but the atmosphere in the Thompson mansion remained electrically charged. Sheikh Mohammed had removed his traditional cloak, a gesture symbolizing the transition from a formal social gathering to a crucial business meeting. His advisors, who normally accompanied him to every event, had been discreetly dismissed hours earlier, indicating the delicate nature of the ongoing discussions. "Mrs. Thompson," began the Sheikh, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned over decades in the business world, "I believe it is time we discuss the practical implications of all these revelations." Emily nodded softly, her fingers gliding over her tablet screen once more. "Certainly, Your Excellency. In fact, I have already prepared a detailed analysis of the immediate and long-term ramifications." Sophia, who remained attentive to the smallest details of the environment, noticed how her employer maintained an impeccable posture, even after hours of emotional confrontation. The navy blue silk ensemble Emily wore remained as pristine as it had been at the start of the evening, as if her outward appearance reflected her meticulous preparation for this moment. "Before we proceed," interrupted William, his voice betraying a slight tremor, "we need to consider the legal consequences of disclosing confidential information." "Confidential?" Emily arched a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Interesting that you mention that, Habibi. Perhaps we should discuss the legality of certain decisions made in the Hudson Bay project." William's face paled even further, if that were possible. The Hudson Bay project was publicly known as one of the Al Fahim Group's greatest successes, but few were aware of its true backstory. "What exactly are you suggesting?" questioned Olivia, leaning forward in her chair. Emily projected a new series of documents onto the wall. "These are the original records of the Hudson Bay negotiations. Observe the dates of the government approvals and the corresponding bank transfers." Sheikh Mohammed adjusted his glasses, studying the numbers with renewed focus. "This is extraordinary. These approvals were obtained in record time. Record time, indeed, agreed Emily. And all perfectly legal, I must add. Because while my husband was busy showcasing his influence at dinners and social events, I was building genuine relationships with key people in various government instances. Sophia recalled the countless meetings that Emily held at her charitable foundation, always focused on educational and social development projects. At the time, it seemed like mere philanthropy, but now the housekeeper understood the true extent of her employer's network of influence. My foundation, continued Emily as if reading Sophia's thoughts, was not just a way to help needy communities. It was a means of establishing meaningful connections with people who truly make a difference in the functioning of the city, people who appreciate concrete results more than empty promises from arrogant businessmen. One of the partners present cleared his throat nervously. Are you saying you use charitable work as a tool for business networking? No, Emily replied firmly. I am saying that I built relationships based on mutual respect and real community benefit. The speed in approvals was just a natural consequence of having people who trusted our ability to deliver projects that truly benefited the city. Sheikh Mohammed nodded slowly, a new understanding dawning on his face. Now I understand why some of our joint projects always seemed to flow so smoothly when the Thompson Group was involved. It wasn't just a matter of political influence. It was a matter of trust, Emily concluded. Something that cannot be bought with money or won with boasts in business meetings. Trust is built over time, through consistent actions and provable results. William, who had remained silent during this exchange, finally found his voice. And you planned all of this? Every move, every connection, every betrayal. The look Emily gave her husband was a complex mix of pity and determination. Betrayal, Habibi? Is this how you see the fact that I protected your interests, even when you were too busy boasting to notice the real dangers? The only betrayal here, intervened Olivia, was against the trust of a woman who dedicated years of her life, not just to keeping your empire standing, but to turning it into something truly respectable. Sophia watched as several guests discreetly nodded in agreement with Olivia's words. The dynamic in the room had completely shifted since the beginning of the evening. Where there had once been servile admiration for William, there was now genuine respect for Emily. But do you know what's really ironic? Continued Emily, her voice now softer. All of this could have been different if you had seen me as a partner rather than a trophy, if you had valued my contribution instead of ridiculing it. We could have been a true team, building something extraordinary together. The silence that followed was deafening. Every person in the room seemed to absorb the weight of those words, reflecting on the missed opportunities and the paths not taken. The Thompson Empire, which had always seemed so solid and invincible, now revealed itself as a complex structure, sustained not by the brilliance of one man, but by the quiet dedication of a woman whom few had truly known. The early morning hours advanced over New York, and through the wide windows of the Thompson mansion, the city lights sparkled like artificial stars. The atmosphere in the main hall had subtly transformed. The luxurious floral arrangements that once dominated the space now seemed like mere accessories in the face of the intensity of the revelations that continued to emerge. Sheikh Mohammed, after a few moments of deep reflection, rose from his armchair with the dignity befitting his position. Mrs. Thompson, I believe it is appropriate for us to discuss the next steps in a more structured manner. Emily nodded, gracefully, her silk hijab reflecting the soft lighting of the room. Certainly, Your Excellency. In fact, I have prepared a detailed presentation on the necessary restructuring of the group. Sophia, who remained discreetly present, noticed how her employer retrieved a new set of documents from her Hermes bag, all organized with the same meticulous precision that characterized every aspect of her life. Before any hasty decisions, intervened William, his voice betraying a mix of desperation and indignation, we need to consider the legal implications and— The legal implications have already been thoroughly analyzed, interrupted Emily, her voice calm but firm, including by the law firm Goldman & Partners, which prepared all the necessary documents for a smooth management transition. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning. Olivia, who had been silently observing, for the past few minutes straightened in her chair. Management transition. Exactly, confirmed Emily, projecting a new set of slides onto the wall. As you can see, over the past 18 months, I have been working with a select team of professionals to develop a corporate restructuring plan that ensures the continuity and sustainable growth of the group. Sheikh Mohammed adjusted his glasses, examining the charts with visible interest. This is remarkable. You have developed an entirely new governance model. A model that prioritizes transparency and corporate accountability, explained Emily, navigating through the slides with elegant precision. Each division of the group will be managed by an independent board, with representatives chosen for their specific expertise, not for family or political connections. William stood up abruptly, his face a mask of disbelief. This is a coup. You can't just reorganize an empire built over decades. Actually, Habibi, replied Emily, her voice carrying a note of refined irony, not only can I, but I already have. All the necessary documents have been duly registered and approved by the relevant authorities. The only reason they haven't been implemented yet is that I was waiting for an appropriate opportunity to present them. Sophia observed how several of those present exchanged meaningful glances. The housekeeper recalled the countless meetings Emily had held in her private office over the past few months, always with discreet and highly qualified professionals. The new management model, continued Emily, includes a significant commitment to social development and sustainability. Each project of the group must allocate a percentage of its profits to community and environmental initiatives. But that will reduce our profit margin, protested William. On the contrary, intervened Sheikh Mohammed, who was carefully studying the numbers. This model actually projects sustainable growth higher than the current one. The integration of social responsibility is not only ethical, but also strategically intelligent in today's global scenario. Olivia stood up, moving closer to the screen to examine the data more closely. These numbers include expansion into international markets we always considered too risky. Because the risk analysis was being done the wrong way, explained Emily. Our new approach involves strategic partnerships with local companies in each target market, significantly reducing operational risk while maximizing growth potential. One of the partners present, who had remained silent until then, spoke up. What about the minority shareholders? How are their interests addressed in this restructuring? Each shareholder will have the option to convert their current shares into a new class of shares with expanded rights, replied Emily, presenting a new set of documents. In fact, many have already expressed their support for the new management model, including some you, William, considered your most loyal allies. The impact of these words was visible on William's face. His empire wasn't just being reorganized, it was being completely transformed, and apparently with the support of people he had always considered firmly under his control. How did you manage? He began, but his voice faltered. How did I get their support? Completed Emily, a gentle smile on her lips. The same way I built all the other alliances, with transparency, respect, and a clear vision of the future. While you were busy keeping up appearances, I was building relationships based on mutual trust and shared benefits. Sophia noticed how Sheikh Mohammed subtly nodded, his expression revealing a newfound appreciation for the woman everyone had underestimated for so long. The housekeeper realized she was witnessing not just a shift in power, but a complete redefinition of what it meant to lead a business empire in the modern world. The first rays of sunlight began to tinge the horizon of New York with golden hues. As Sheikh Mohammed finally closed the last folder of documents, the sky, visible through the wide windows of the Thompson mansion, displayed that unique shade that precedes dawn, symbolically fitting for the moment of transformation unfolding. Inside the residence, Mrs. Thompson, pronounced the Sheikh, his voice carrying the weight of authority and decision, your restructuring plans are not only impressive, but fundamentally necessary for the evolution of the group in today's global landscape. Emily inclined, her head slightly in acknowledgement of the praise, her expression maintaining that characteristic serenity, which everyone now understood, masked an extraordinarily strategic mind. I appreciate your assessment, Your Excellency. The support of your bank will be crucial during the transition phase. Sophia, who had just returned to the hall with a tray of fresh coffee, observed how the first rays of sunlight made her employer's hijab shine with an almost ethereal glow. The housekeeper couldn't help but notice how that light seemed symbolic. A new day literally dawning alongside a new era for the Thompson Empire. The bank's board, continued the sheikh, helping himself to coffee, will certainly view the corporate governance measures you propose favorably, especially the creation of the Independent Oversight Committee. William, who had remained seated in his armchair like a statue of salt, finally found his voice. And what about the group's presidency? You can't just... The presidency, Emily interrupted gently, will be held by a rotating board, composed of market professionals with proven experience in international management. You, Habibi, will have the option to retain an honorary position as President Emeritus without executive powers. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of coffee cups being delicately handled. Olivia, who had spent the last hour studying the restructuring documents, looked up with an expression of renewed understanding. These new trade agreements with Singapore and London, she commented, are already in advanced stages of negotiation, aren't they? Correct, confirmed Emily, projecting a new set of slides onto the wall. In fact, the legal teams have already finalized most of the documentation. We were merely waiting for the right moment for implementation. Sheikh Mohammed leaned forward, his eyes scanning the numbers with evident interest. The geographic diversification is impressive. You essentially created a global network, while everyone thought you were just organizing charity events. Philanthropy, Amina replied with a subtle smile, has always been more than just charity. Every social project we've developed over the years served as a bridge to strategic relationships in different markets. Sophia recalled her employer's countless international trips, always under the pretext of overseeing foundation projects. Now, the housekeeper understood that each of those trips had been a carefully placed piece on a global chessboard. The projected numbers for the first year after the restructuring, commented one of the partners present, reviewing the documents, seem overly optimistic. On the contrary, Amina responded, navigating to a new set of data. These projections are extremely conservative. In fact, we already have preliminary agreements securing about 60% of the targets set for the next 18 months. Khalid stood up abruptly, his face a mask of disbelief. Impossible. No one could have orchestrated so many deals without me knowing. That's exactly the point, Habibi, Amina replied, her voice carrying a note of regret. You were so busy being the public face of the empire, so absorbed in your own image, that you never noticed the real work being done behind the scenes. Sheikh Mohammed cleared his throat softly, drawing everyone's attention. The international partners, are they already aware of this restructuring? Not just aware, Amina confirmed, but actively involved in its implementation. The transition will be announced simultaneously in New York, London, Singapore, and New York, showcasing the truly global nature the group will assume. Olivia let out a sigh of admiration. You really thought of everything, didn't you? Every detail, every possible obstacle. It was necessary, Emily replied simply. The future of the group, the livelihood of thousands of employees, the impact on entire communities, all of it depended on a meticulously planned transition. The sun had now fully risen on the horizon, bathing the room in its golden light. Sophia observed how the light seemed to highlight each person present in a different way. Sheikh Mohammed in his thoughtful dignity, Olivia in her growing understanding, William in his silent defeat, and Emily shone with the quiet strength of someone who could finally reveal her true nature. The morning sun now fully illuminated New York as Emily opened the final set of documents on her tablet. The exhaustion from an entire night of revelations was visible on the faces of those present, but no one showed any intention of ending this historic meeting. The future of the Thompson Empire was being reshaped before their eyes. There's one more aspect of the restructuring that needs to be discussed, Emily announced, her voice maintaining that characteristic serenity that everyone now understood to be one of her greatest strengths. The human aspect of our transformation. Sophia, who had just served a new round of coffee to everyone, noticed how her employer softened her tone even further when addressing this topic. In all their years together, the housekeeper had always observed how Emily showed genuine concern for the well-being of the employees, from the executives to the cleaning staff. "What do you mean, the human aspect?" Olivia asked, leaning forward in her chair. Emily projected a new set of slides onto the wall. "This is our talent appreciation and development plan, a comprehensive program that will not only preserve existing jobs, but also create new opportunities for professional growth across all divisions of the group." Sheikh Mohammed adjusted his glasses, examining the numbers with renewed interest. "This is remarkable. You are proposing a significant investment in training and development." "More than that," replied Emily, navigating through the slides with elegant precision. "We are establishing partnerships with the world's leading universities for executive development programs, creating an innovation hub in New York, and implementing a profit-sharing system that will benefit all hierarchical levels." William, who had remained silent for some time, let out a bitter laugh. "And who is going to pay for all this? This kind of program costs a fortune." "The funding," Emily replied calmly, "is already fully structured. In fact, a significant portion will come from the resources we save by eliminating certain administrative inefficiencies that you implemented over the years." Sheikh Mohammed cleared his throat softly, a subtle smile playing on his lips. "Are you referring to the various consultants and experts who were hired more for their connections than their competence?" "Precisely," confirmed Emily. "Our audit identified over $300 million in contracts that can be immediately terminated without any negative impact on our operations." Olivia let out an admiring sigh. "You really mapped out every wasted penny, didn't you?" "It was necessary," Emily replied, her voice now carrying a note of determination. "Every dirham saved means more resources to invest in our true asset, the people who make this group function." Sophia noticed how several of those present exchanged meaningful glances. The housekeeper recalled the countless times she had seen Emily talking to employees at all levels, always showing genuine interest in their lives and aspirations. The program also includes, Emily continued, projecting new data, a special fund for continuing education. Any employee, regardless of their position, can request support for courses and specializations relevant to their field. "This is revolutionary," commented one of the partners present. "No other company in the region has such a comprehensive program." "Because no other company truly understands the value of human capital," replied Emily. "You don't build a lasting empire with just glass and steel buildings. You build it with committed, valued, and motivated people." Sheikh Mohammed closed the folder he had been reviewing, a gesture that seemed to carry great significance. "Mrs. Thompson, I must confess that in all my years in the business world, I have rarely seen such a comprehensive and balanced vision of corporate management." "And do you know what's most extraordinary?" interjected Olivia, her gaze shifting between Emily and William. "All of this was happening right under our noses while we believed she was just a devoted wife organizing charity events." William sank deeper into his chair, the weight of each revelation seeming to crush him physically. His empire wasn't just changing hands, it was being completely reinvented, transformed into something he could barely comprehend. "But there's more," announced Emily, her voice now carrying a note of restrained emotion. "The true heart of this transformation is yet to come. Because beyond all these structural changes and development programs, there is one final revelation that will forever alter the future of the Thompson Group." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Sophia, who had known her employer for so many years, felt a shiver of anticipation. The morning sun now fully illuminated the hall, as if nature itself wanted to ensure that nothing remained in the shadows at this historic moment. The sunlight now flooded the main hall of the Thompson mansion, marking not just the start of a new day in New York, but also the beginning of a new era for one of the most powerful business empires in the Middle East. Emily remained standing, her elegant silhouette framed against the urban landscape stretching beyond the panoramic windows. "The final revelation I have to share," she began, her voice carrying a weight that made everyone instinctively lean forward. is not just about the future of the Thompson Group, but about the legacy we intend to build for the generations to come. Sophia, who knew her employer better than anyone else in that room, noticed a subtle shift in her posture. It was as if Emily was finally about to remove the last mask she still wore. As everyone knows, Emily continued, activating a new projection on the wall. Our charitable foundation has been dedicated in recent years to educational projects in underserved communities. What no one knew until now is that these projects were part of a much larger vision. Sheikh Mohammed adjusted his glasses, examining the new data with evident interest. These numbers are extraordinary. Did you establish a complete network of technological development centers? Precisely, confirmed Emily. Every social project we implemented over the past 5 years included a component of technological education. While the world saw only basic literacy programs, we were quietly training the next generation of innovators and entrepreneurs. William, who had remained in stunned silence, finally found his voice. But this must have cost a fortune. Where did the money come from? An enigmatic smile played on Emily's lips. Remember that plot of land in San Francisco that you considered a waste of money? The one you practically forced me to sell because you thought it was unproductive. The land near the new tech district, asked Olivia, her eyes widening with sudden understanding. Exactly, replied Emily. I did sell the land, but not for the price you thought, William. In fact, I negotiated a strategic partnership with the San Francisco government. The land was granted for the construction of the largest technological innovation center in the Middle East, and in return we received a significant stake in all the projects that will be developed there. Sheikh Mohammed let out an exclamation of surprise. The Tech Nexus? The one that will be inaugurated next month? Are you behind this? Not just behind, Emily corrected gently. The Tech Nexus is only the first phase of a much larger project. Every educational center we've established through the foundation is connected to it, forming a network of talent development that spans the entire region. Sophia watched as William's face cycled through a rapid succession of emotions. Shock, disbelief, anger, and finally, a stunned understanding of the true scope of his wife's vision. But the most important thing, Emily continued, her voice now carrying a note of genuine emotion, is the impact this will have on the lives of thousands of young people. We're not just building structures or developing technology, we're creating real opportunities for social transformation. Sheikh Mohammed rose slowly from his armchair, a gesture that carried the weight of decades of business experience. Mrs. Thompson, what you've built here goes far beyond a business empire. You've created a legacy that will change the future of the entire region. And that's why, Emily replied, pulling a final set of documents from her briefcase, the restructuring of the Thompson Group isn't just an administrative change, it's the foundation of something much greater. Starting today, 50% of all the group's profits will be automatically directed to an innovation and social development investment fund. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning. William seemed to have aged a decade in mere seconds, while Olivia and the others present processed the implications of that final revelation. The shareholder, began one of the partners, but Emily gently interrupted. They've already approved the measure, she explained. In fact, many of them increased their stake in the group after learning the full plan, because they understood something you never did, William. True power doesn't lie in accumulating wealth, but in using it to create real value for society. The sun was now high in the New York sky, its rays transforming the room into a kaleidoscope of light and shadows. Sophia, watching the scene with discreet tears in her eyes, thought about how this moment marked not just the end of an era, but the birth of something truly extraordinary. And so, concluded Emily, her voice now carrying a note of finality, the empire you built with such pride, William, will not be remembered for the skyscrapers you erected or the deals you closed. It will be remembered for the impact it will have on the lives of future generations. This is the true legacy we will build, not in your name, but in the name of all those who believe that business success and social responsibility not only can, but must, go hand in hand. Sheikh Mohammed was the first to speak, rising to extend his hand to Emily in a gesture of deep respect. "Mashallah," he murmured, his voice filled with admiration. "You have not only saved an empire, you have transformed it into something truly revolutionary." And so, as the sun continued its ascent over New York, illuminating the contours of a city in constant transformation, the Thompson Empire began its own metamorphosis. No longer a monument to one man's ambition, but a testament to the transformative power of a truly inclusive and humanitarian vision. Dear readers, the story of Emily and her journey of transformation within the Thompson Empire shows us that the greatest changes often begin with small acts of courage. To continue exploring equally inspiring narratives about power, transformation, and justice, we have prepared a special playlist that you can find in the link to the left. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on the video. Also, share in the comments your thoughts on how small acts of resistance can lead to great transformations. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of human relationships and the power of determination. Turn on the bell to not miss any of our upcoming content. And you, from which city are you watching us? Let us know in the comments. Your location and how this story resonated with your own life experiences.